The Trump administration is planning to ban buyers linked to China from purchasing farmland in the U.S. Chinese investors own about 265,000 acres of land. To put it in perspective, that is a fraction of 1% of the farmland in the U.S. You can see the exact number on your screen. But this move also applies to other foreign adversaries. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rawns says this ban is necessary to keep Americans safe.
American agriculture is not just about feeding our families, but about protecting our nation and standing up to foreign adversaries who are buying our farmland, stealing our research, and creating dangerous vulnerabilities in the very systems that sustain us.
Cate Cadell joins us now. She's a national security reporter for The Washington Post who has been following this story. Kate, thanks so much for being with us. You know, as we mentioned, this really is just such a small amount of farmland we're talking about here. What is the administration's reasoning on how this could be a threat?
So the big threat around Chinese investment in U.S. farmland is about proximity to military bases, and that's really what sort of kicked off this spark of concern. So I guess the concern there is that Chinese investors, if they were coerced by the Chinese government, could conduct espionage or surveillance from this land. They could surveil troop movements, things like that. And the big case that sparked concern was a Chinese company in North Dakota that bought a lot of land close to an air base up there. There's also a less realistic threat about, you know, if a country like China owns a lot of the food supply chain, then in a time of crisis, they could restrict that and affect the food supply in the U.S.
Is there any sense that American farmers will be impacted by this? Could they see any benefit? Will there be any real effect on prices Americans see at the grocery store from this?
No, I don't think so. Just because of exactly what you mentioned, which is that Chinese investors, in truth, own so little land in the US. And in fact, in the past 4 or 5 years, they've actually reduced the amount of land they own by almost a third. And that's got more to do with factors around Chinese regulations than US regulations. Also, about a third of that land is owned by a single supplier, which is Smithfield Foods. And they primarily actually serve the US market. They also employ around 43,000 US employees. So I suppose one of the effects would be it would affect those people employed by Smithfield.
And Kate, as you know, there is bipartisan support for taking on China. How much is that driving the Trump administration's decision making here?
I'd say that has a very big impact. There is an aspect of saber rattling here. There's no downsides for a lawmaker in the U.S. To go after China. And if you look at the way that Republican lawmakers talk about China, you know, that's very clearly one aspect of it. To be clear, I mean, this would be a very different situation if China owned a huge amount of farmland. They don't own a huge amount of farmland. And Chinese agents have spied on military bases. We see cases like this all the time. But typically, it doesn't come from farmland. In fact, we have never seen a known case of Chinese agents spying or cases where farmland's been used to spy on military bases. What we do see is it's usually people just traveling to these bases and taking photos under tourist visas and work visas.
Cate Cadell, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.